Now, I know to some people this is going to be a 2020 film because it was in an international film festival, TIFF to be exact. But because of its wide release on Netflix on January 7th, I consider it a 2021 film. It's very hard to talk about the plot of Pieces of a Woman because this is one of those films that's far more character driven. But if I were to describe the plot, it is about grief. It stars Vanessa Kirby and Shia LaBeouf as a couple. Tragedy strikes, and it's about the grieving process of these two people. One of them having to accept the tragedy, and the other one who's already accepted it and feels that the other one isn't and is just too cold. It's about how these two people are so out of sync with their grieving process that it's splitting them apart. At least that's one of the themes that I looked into a little bit more. Pieces of a Woman is one of those films with some phenomenal performances. I think everyone, even all the side characters, really did give a good performance, but there were a few easy standouts. For one, Vanessa Kirby is pretty much our main character. I think Shia LaBeouf is also a main character, but when we're left with Vanessa Kirby for the rest of the film at the very end, she is clearly the main star, and she gives a really good performance. This is also another one of those films where Shia LaBeouf stands out as well. He can act. He can do some really great stuff. It's unfortunate that sometimes we don't notice it that much because he just falls off the radar sometimes and does some really crazy shit. Ellen Burstyn plays Vanessa Kirby's mother in the film. She's also really good, and she has at least a few moments where she steals the scene as well. And while Molly Parker isn't in the film a lot, she's pretty much in the beginning of the film and at the end of the film. I think she was also a standout performance as well. But hands down, this was one of those films where all the performances are really good, in my opinion. The directing and writing was great, and I feel that it's clear that this is a much personal level for the writer and the director. This is a husband and wife duo, I believe, and I believe that this home birth scene that happens in the film is something that the director and writer actually went through from my understanding of what has been said about this movie. And I can honestly really feel it because that home birth scene is clearly the best part of the movie, in my opinion. It's the most astonishing on a technical level. It's such a great performance. There is such art to it, and it's also heartbreaking. I think ultimately that's become the major flaw to this film for people because the first 30 minutes is just so amazing, especially the home birth scene. And it's so phenomenal on a technical level and a performance level and everything that it feels like the film peaks right before the title sequence pops up. And so the rest of the film, which is 2 hours and 17 minutes long, by the way, the rest of the 2 hours or so of film just doesn't match the first 30 minutes in that level of quality. I completely understand that. I see why people feel that way. I still like the film, and I still feel there's some great moments after those 30 minutes, but really that home birth scene is pretty much the reason to see this movie on a student level, a film level, and honestly, yeah, if that home birth scene was actually just a short movie, it honestly could work. Pieces of a Woman is purposefully a very hard movie to sit through because it goes to such depths to their grief, and it's so bleak and it's so dark and it's so horrible to sit through in a meaningful way. So if people decide to see this film and they're not in the right mood for a depressing, bleak story, chances are they're going to hate it. And I completely understand why. Granted, there is hope at the end of this film, which makes it more inspirational, but this movie really makes you feel what the characters feel, in their grieving process and just the little things that have to be done after such a crazy tragedy. I like the conflict between the couple and the things that they're going through. I like that Shia LaBeouf's character is more of a physical like griever and one that lets his emotions come out.
I'm sorry that I need you to promise me you won't. You can't send her anywhere. Please. Promise me.
I promise.
While Vanessa Kirby's character is one that's more inner grief and trying to find a way to accept what's happening, but unable to. And I like the conflict between the two and how this doesn't mesh and how it tears them apart. It's tragic. This movie is 2 hours and 17 minutes long or so. So a lot of this story is just little pieces of their life as it goes on. So I really love it when the scenes actually stay long and we actually process things. There's some really great movies that can just show tidbits of a person's life throughout, or tidbits of the story, and just give you enough information for you to understand what's going on. And for the most part, Pieces of a Woman does that, but I do feel that there are moments where it feels a little too extreme, and I didn't quite understand how a character got to this decision. It felt like, oh, there's a few scenes that need to be developed more for us to understand it. It's hard to explain without telling you what happens. But again, it could have just been me because I didn't factor in the times when it showed how long time has passed, because every so often a title sequence would happen where it shows what month of the year it is and show the bridge, because there is a bridge that Shia LaBeouf, he's a construction worker, it looks like, and he's building a bridge in the city. And whenever it goes to a time, it shows this unfinished bridge getting completed. But I think sometimes my mind didn't factor in just how long it's been between scenes, and so I don't really get the investment of just how long things have been deteriorating between the two of them. And so when there is a moment where it really breaks them, it feels a little too extreme and sudden for me. There is at least one point in the film where it gets a little too uncomfortable for me. Granted, this is a film that's meant to be uncomfortable to watch, but there is a moment where it gets a little too uncomfortable for my taste. And there was a moment in the film where it just sort of loses me, mainly because I just didn't understand how characters would choose certain actions, I guess. Maybe I just wasn't in the same mind frame or the mindset of these characters to understand that situation. Or that they just made a decision that I totally wouldn't agree with, so it just doesn't mesh. But by the end of the film, when it gets to more of the trial stuff, or no, when it got to the family reunion scene where all of them get together, that's when the movie picked up again for me, and that's when it hooked me in again. It's a part, I'm trying to think what part it lost me, but there's a section of the film where I'm just like sort of completely out of it and I sort of checked out. But then it brought me back in with the family reunion scene. I think it was the uncomfortable scene where Shia LaBeouf is trying to bring their sex life back. That's an uncomfortable watch. And then there's a few scenes after that where it just loses me because of the decisions that both of the characters made. But eventually, the family reunion scene brought me back in, hooked me back in, and I thought that the ending, while still not as good as the first 30 minutes, was closer to that quality. There's not a lot to talk about with Pieces of a Woman. There's great performances, great camera work and editing. The first 30 minutes is amazing. The home birth scene is I don't know if it actually was one long shot or edited in a way that makes it look like a one long shot, but they pulled it off. So there's great things to talk about with camera work and editing and the directing and writing. Everything was pretty amazing. This is one of those movies where normally I probably would have given it 4.5 stars. The only problem for me is that first 30 minutes peaks the film. The rest of the film isn't as good as those first 30 minutes. It's still great, but there's a section of the film where it just loses me, and I just lost a connection with the film. Maybe it was just me, but eventually it reeled me back in. So ultimately, I think I'm going to give Pieces of a Woman 4 stars. Out of 5, of course. Anyway, have you seen Pieces of a Woman? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. If you like this video and want to see more, please subscribe and check out my other movie reviews. I hope to have at least one more today and at least film another one right after it. I have Herself to talk about. And then maybe while I'm rendering those 2 movie reviews, I'll be able to watch another Netflix movie called Stuck Apart. Was it called? I think it was called Stuck Apart. And a generic action-looking film called Redemption Day. So those 2 will be next after I upload these 2 videos. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.